There are rumors and there are rumblings, and these are rumblings that I actually think make a lot of sense, and I don't know why I didn't think of them. Because the Asian Football Federation, right, through the Asian Football Confederation, or whatever it is, the AFC, probably the second one based off the abbreviation, has had some turmoil, some controversy. I'm going to explain the controversy, and then I'm going to kind of explain where it leads, because what we are looking at is the very early stages, potentially, of the actual of the AFC kind of splitting in half and creating two continents instead of what we have now, which is one. But if we look at World Cup qualifying in Asia, the latest example of this has popped up pretty recently. If I could actually qualifiers Asia, if I could actually type effectively, this would be a lot easier. Okay. If you go to the most recent round of Asian World Cup qualifying, which requires a truly ridiculous amount of scrolling, you'll notice there are two groups of three. You have Group A and Group B, right? Qatar, UAE, Oman, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Indonesia. Now, only one of these 6 teams would be in the potential breakaway continent, right? The breakaway continent in Asia would, of course, be East Asia and West Asia, right? West Asia had 5 of the 6 teams that happened to be in this round, with Qatar, UAE, and Oman all being there, and Saudi Arabia and Iraq being there, Indonesia being the East Asian representative, and they honestly, truthfully, with you, the worst team that made it to this round. But the issue and the complaint that people had, that people pointed at, that was the latest example in a long line of slights that seemed to tilt towards Qatar and Saudi Arabia in the oil states in general, is that in this round, where you only play 2 matches, all in one international window, Qatar and Saudi Arabia were the home teams. So all of these matches were played in those 2 places. And Saudi Arabia played matches 1 and 3, meaning they got a break between their matches, and Qatar played matches 1 and 3. So they were home and they played matches 1 and 3, right? And when you look for corruption in football, very rarely, at least in my opinion, is it money under the table for some obvious bribery. Typically, the way that it works, the way that you exert soft power if you are the person in control, is shit like this happens. Now, I feel like it wasn't an entirely unfair argument, because I'm pretty sure Saudi Arabia and Qatar were the highest seeded teams in each of these groups. But it was also not made clear before the tournament that the highest seeded team would be the host for these rounds of for this round of matches. And there was no official statement ever acknowledging that they were the hosts because they were the highest world ranked teams in each of these groups. Which, again, I believe they were. Saudi Arabia obviously is. I'm 95% sure Qatar is, right? Because they've won back-to-back Asian Cups, which is kind of insane. But then even you point at that, look at where all of the Asian Cups have been hosted recently. Let's pull that up. Because the answer is not going to surprise you. The 3 of the last 4 have been in Qatar, UAE, Qatar. The next one's in Saudi Arabia. The only one outside of that in the United Arab Emirates. There's something else to consider as part of all of this, is the fact that AFC relies primarily on Gulf sponsorship. This is not necessarily surprising that Etihad, Qatar Airways, Emirates Airlines, Qatar Energy, Saudi Aramco, and BN Media Group are all involved in sponsoring AFC. So obviously where the money goes, they're going to be able to, if you have the money and the money is engaged with kind of what you're doing, you can twist the screws a little bit. You can make things happen that otherwise perhaps would not happen. But what was the idea? First, it was leaked by, according to a couple of articles I've found, reporting in Iraq, right? Iraq, of course, being one of the teams that was involved in this set of matches in Asian World Cup qualifying, right? They were here and ended up having to play back-to-back matches and ended up drawing Saudi Arabia and finishing, 1 goal on the goal difference behind Saudi Arabia, or actually just on goals for, quite honestly, behind Saudi Arabia for an automatic spot in the World Cup, which is incredibly heartbreaking. But the story broke that Japan was perhaps looking for a way out. And as I think I started this video with, this makes complete sense. It does. I mean, outside of the fact that Japan has a lot of power, they're basically the only people that could do this. And they would be doing it for reasons of, they believe that the actual Asian Federation's power balance is tilted towards West Asia. Even if they're doing it for that reason, I think this is something that they should do anyways. The travel distances in Asia are larger than any of the travel distances in any other federation. It's not particularly close. Guam is in AFC. Guam can have an away day against Palestine, against Lebanon, on the Mediterranean. That's the other side of the world. Australia is obviously also an AFC, but they signed up for the long travel, so I'm not going to give them, I'm not going to give them the leeway, right? They moved out of Oceania because they wanted the competition. AFC accepted them. I think all of that makes complete sense. But they're able to handle that. Right? These other nations, Japan being one of them, to be perfectly honest, that are incredibly far away, Brunei, Darussalam, Indonesia, Timor-Leste. These nations can get drawn against Iraq, Bahrain, right? They have to go all the way. Oh, it's just a huge travel distance. They already have to break up. For those that don't know, the Asian Champions League is not a combined thing, where it is in basically every other continent. CONCACAF, South America with the Libertadores, Africa. It's a combined thing. Even the first round of qualifying, it's all, Asia's is split. There's the Eastern qualifying and the Western qualifying. And then it only combines at a certain stage in those competitions. So, I mean, it's already split in some cases anyways. And there is an East Asian Football Federation. There's a Southeast Asian Football Federation. There are a lot of countries over there. It's not like there wouldn't be enough countries. Asia now has 8.5 World Cup spots. All you got to do is split that in half. Maybe you don't want to split that in half. Maybe East gets 3 and West gets 5, because let's be honest, West has more good teams. It actually does. More teams that make the World Cup from Asia will come out of the West than will come out of the East. You'll get South Korea, Japan, Australia. I'm pretty sure that's it. And then out of the West, you get your Iran, your Iraq, your Saudi Arabia, your Qatar, which is already headed to the World Cup, by the way. Your Uzbekistan is probably going to be in the West, right? It's west of India. This is a map, by the way, that I've pulled up just to give you an idea of the teams that made the Asian Cup. Or at some point. This is the teams in the initial group stage of the Asian Cup. And you see there's kind of a line here, right? The step is a line in Asia. And east of that, there are lots of nations. And west of that, there are lots of nations that can participate in this sort of that can participate in their own federation. Like, I don't know how real this reporting is, right? There's some article, this article I've translated from Japanese that talks about how Japan's footballing structure was upset because one Chinese club got kicked out of the Champions League after a Japanese team had played them. And all of the points were refunded. But the Japanese team also had like suspensions carry over, and the suspensions weren't wiped away. So they thought that was some sort of weird double standard, and they were frustrated with AFC for that. That's another cited piece of anger that the Japanese have towards AFC in general. But Japan's the best team in the entire continent. There is no debate about that. Japan is one of the 15 best national teams in the world, and I think has a top 10 chance to actually win the World Cup, right? Which is, a Croatia's type chance. But it's there. And there's no other team out of Asia, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, absolutely included in that have a snowball's chance in hell, as I like to say, of actually winning the whole thing. Japan's the flag bearer for the entire continent. Suffice it to say, if Japan actually wanted to do this, which it sounds like at the most, this is a very preliminary conversation. Like, hey, if things keep going this way, we could do this. Just a little floater, just a little shot across the bow for the people from Qatar, UAE, Saudi Arabia that are kind of pulling the strings in AFC. Say, hey, if you want to stick around on this, you can't keep doing this shit. Because they absolutely could. If they wanted to, they could. They could carry that flag and plant it in the ground and bring every Eastern half Asian nation in with them. And it would save them a lot of money on travel. And honestly, even though physically all of these nations are on the same continent, it would be a little more culturally similar. Because there is a huge difference between Lebanon and Guam, right? And I like how in continents there can be giant cultural differences, and that can be fun too, when you got Tunisia playing against Central African Republic or whatever. But it's also cool to keep it in enough of a corner of your world that you're not basically playing on the other side of the world. That is also neat. When England plays Hungary, there's still kind of a European camaraderie going on, even if you are from very different parts of that culture. I think they should do it, but I don't think it'll happen. I really don't think it'll happen. I think AFC and the people that run it are smart enough to know that they really shouldn't piss off one of their cash cows that produces some of their best clubs and their best national team. And then South Korea is also there as well, and they want to keep Australia in there. So I'd be very surprised if it happened. But a bold stance from Japan, visionary stance, and one that quite frankly makes sense on paper.